everyone, it's Vesper Starov here with another video, and today I'm going to talk about how you can practice deity work in secrecy. In a perfect world, we wouldn't have to hide our spiritual beliefs or practices, but unfortunately we do live in a not completely understanding society. So, as someone who very much had to hide their practice in the beginning before I got confident enough to really be open about it, I'm gonna give y'all some tips on what I did to practice my spiritual beliefs while still living at home. That being said, I am an adult, and I just want to say that while I'm going to show a bunch of items and stuff that you can buy to use in your practice that are very discreet, you are completely able to practice your beliefs without having to have any physical items. A lot of people make a big show of oh, you have to have all the biggest, fanciest things to be able to do it properly, but that is not at all true. So that being said, my first thing will be on the mental side. When I first started working with Asmodeus, I was like, I can't have an altar for him. And altars are not necessary either, but I personally just really like them. So my friend recommended that I create an astral temple to work with Asmodeus in. So I actually started doing that before bed. So an astral temple is basically like a mental world that you make for yourself. Even if you can't astral project, it's basically as simple as daydreaming up your own little place. My first one was just like a little cabin in the woods. And, I would meet with him there in meditation. And it's really that simple. I had stuff set up for him there until I was more confident to start putting him his own spot, which it's kind of funny because he did help me a lot with my confidence to where I'm at the point now where I can be so open, even if my mom is still kind of unaware of what I'm doing, even though I have a huge demonic altar set up on my dresser. So that's that. Astral temples are their whole thing, but it is basically just like a little temple or house, castle, whatever you want, a cave that you create mentally, and you are able to interact with the spirits there. So if you can't have anything at all, just imagine yourself having it in this astral temple. So with that out of the way, I will go on to divination tools because that's pretty important for deity work. If you don't have your clair senses activated, so how are you going to talk to deities? If you're unable to have tarot or pendulums, these next things will help with that. Any deck of playing cards can be used as a tarot deck. I know that they have correspondences, this kind of playing card can represent this tarot card. I don't know much about that, but I just want to throw it out there that that's an option. And any kind of card can be used as an oracle card, like Pokemon cards. I actually use Pokemon cards sometimes as tarot or oracle cards. You shuffle them, ask a question, and then put them out just like you would normally. And if you know things about Pokemon and stuff, you can use that knowledge to do a pretty accurate reading. I might do a whole video on that on its own because it's very interesting. I believe it's called Pokemancy. And it's like a really neat thing to do, to involve like one of my favorite things and then my spiritual beliefs. So that can be used. And with pendulums, even though pendulums aren't really necessary for a practice, I think they're a good kind of starting point. My friend actually gave me my first pendulum. I just kind of had it on a shelf. Pendulums are very small and you can hide them easily. But, you know, if you can't even have that, necklaces that have some weight to them, really, you can use necklaces. You can get a thread and a needle if the needle is a bit heavier than like super light. And you can use that. Really, any kind of weighty thing on a string or rope can be used, but you don't want it to be like too heavy, you know. On the topic of necklaces, I love having devotional jewelry to wear on myself, representing these spirits that I work with. You know, they work as a source of protection, but also I just love to honor my spirits throughout the day. So my first piece of jewelry, and it's very sentimental to me now, that I ever got for my practice was this necklace. Behave, sir. Was this necklace of Lucifer's sigil. It's a very simple necklace with his sigil engraved into it. And for a while, I would keep it under my shirt until, you know, I started wearing it out, and my mom's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "It's just a sigil I use for protection." And she's like, "All right." So demons and angels kind of have universal sigils that you can use to represent them. You can easily find ones that are vague enough where it just looks like a cool design, and, you know, ones that don't have their name around it. But I wouldn't say this is a completely, like, incognito way, because other people who know of those spirits will know what that represents. And, you know, when someone's wearing a bunch of strange symbols, it kind of raises some flags and people will ask. So this isn't 100% incognito way to practice, but it is a way if you're able to be a slightly more open. And beside that, literally any piece of jewelry, you can just be like, I dedicate this to this spirit, and it's as simple as that. This is a bracelet that I use to represent Asmodeus. I got it on Etsy, and it was actually made to be a devotional bracelet for him, but you can literally use any kind of piece of jewelry for that. And my favorite thing to do, especially because I'm a furry, is finding out what animals symbolize that spirit, using those in place to represent said spirit. So, like, before I started getting more open, so right now I actually have a statue of Asmodeus himself to represent him on his altar spot, but before then, I actually used this wolf statue. Wolves aren't actually an animal that represents him, but he wanted this statue in particular because wolves are my favorite animal. And also, in some lore, Lady Nama is Asmodeus' mother, and this is actually one of her represented animals. So I think it was just a nice correspondence to have. And, you know, if you work with, say, like, the Egyptian gods and work with, like, Bast, you know, she's the goddess of cats, so you can have cat jewelry and the like, or cat statues, stuff like that. And you can even find statues of your deity that might be a little more incognito. Like, a lot of people will use this statue to represent Lucifer. because this is actually a statue of Lucifer himself that I eventually got before I had like all my other stuff. And I did tell my mother that's who it was because she had just watched the show Lucifer, so she was a bit more on board. Because she's like, oh, you should call him Lucifer, and I'm like, that's who it is. And see, like, stuff like this you can easily do more incognito. Like, my brother thought this was Michael, which was very funny. And I'm like, no, that's Lucifer. Because at this point, I was being a bit more open about really liking Lucifer, you know. And he does have a peacock feather that I got him at the crystal shop. Because peacocks can be like one of Lucifer's symbolic animals. And like crows and stuff. You know, and if you don't know what their symbolic animal is, you can kind of just think of an animal that you kind of relate to them, and if they're cool with it, you know, you can use that. Like I said, none of this stuff is technically necessary to have, but I personally just enjoy having it because it's nice having these statues and stuff, because it's like having a physical embodiment of your deity that you can look at. So even if you use a statue of an animal, when I saw those wolves, I would always think of Asmodeus, and it's like, oh, there he is. And then, you know, if you can be a bit more open, you can always get crystals. This is a selenite, and you can get any kind of crystals and give it to your spirit as an offering, and just kind of have like a devotional crystal that you can meditate with or do what have you with. Candles and incense too. You can burn those. You can dedicate those to deities. Any kind of candle or incense, you can be like, I give this to you as an offering. Those are very like common and, you know, that kind of stuff. You can do that too. I also find you can dedicate literally any kind of object to a deity. This right here, this tapestry, it is of a tarot card, but this is like a devotional item for Shamyaza. So you can use any kind of tapestry that's kind of like symbolic to you of that deity. I have that pillow over there. I dedicated it to Asmodeus. I like wrote his sigil on a piece of paper, and I did kind of like a spell bag, and I shoved it inside the pillow. That kind of stuff you can do. I hear some people dedicate articles of clothing or blankets to deities. I haven't done this yet myself, but I just might, because I think it would be very nice to have like Lucifer's energy on a blanket. He is so comforting, and it's such a nice energy to be around. You can also incorporate some symbolism in, like, if you do art, your art or writing. And don't let anyone tell you that you have to do it a certain way. This is just what I did with my own personal practice, starting out and having to hide it. And I did start out with an altar. On my bookshelf, I just kind of laid out a bandana that was just discreet. And I just put a bunch of like knick-knack type stuff. Crafts I've made, or the crystals and rocks that I already did have. And when I started working with Lucifer, I took a piece of paper and I wrote his sigil and just kind of set it on top of it. And I kind of did cover it up a bit with like rocks and stuff. And it was never noticed, but you know, everyone's different. I don't know what your own situations are like, but these are just some methods that I used. And the spirits won't get mad at you if you can't be open about your beliefs or practice or them, because they are very understanding about our own situations. So do keep that in mind. And remember that mental work is also very valid. If you can't have anything, you don't have the money for these things. But like that wolf statue, I already owned, So don't think you also have to get new things. You can use what is already at your disposal. But these are just tips and tricks that I've picked up because, you know, sometimes we want to have physical items, and that's okay. So that's it for this video for now. If you have more questions and concerns about practicing in secrecy, you can just leave a comment on this video and I'll answer it. So anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye!